Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply human story, one that's totally fascinating, but honestly, a little unsettling. We're looking at the rental friends industry in Tokyo. It's this quiet phenomenon that forces us to ask some really difficult questions about human connection in the modern age, specifically looking at how this industry has grown out of one of the world's most bustling, yet surprisingly isolating environments.
I mean, Tokyo is undeniably one of the busiest cities on the planet. Think about those iconic images you've probably seen. The massive, chaotic crowds at Shibuya Crossing, the completely packed subway trains, that endless glow of neon lights. Millions of people move through these streets every single day, literally shoulder to shoulder. But the paradox of a massive city is that proximity doesn't automatically equal connection. Behind all those bright lights and right in the middle of those massive crowds, a staggering number of people feel completely and utterly alone. And it's exactly in that deep sense of individual isolation that a very strange, very specific industry was born. So, is it possible to buy a friend? Just let the emotional weight of that sink in for a second. We aren't talking about paying for a professional therapist or a life coach here. We are talking about renting human connection. Because in Tokyo right now, for a few hours, you can pay someone to walk beside you, eat dinner with you, laugh with your jokes, and essentially pretend to care about you. But how does a system like this actually work? Is it genuinely helping lonely people, or is it just making their loneliness even worse?
Okay, let's dive into this. A rental friend is exactly what it sounds like. Through various websites and smartphone apps, people can literally hire someone by the hour just to spend time with them. The industry has actually been quietly expanding in Tokyo for years now. Some companies market it broadly as, companionship experiences, while others are a lot more direct, advertising emotional support. But the core mechanic is exactly the same across the board. It's a transactional arrangement for companionship.
Now, you might be wondering, what exactly does a rental friend actually do? Well, the activities themselves seem incredibly normal, harmless, really. Joining someone for a cup of coffee, simply sitting down and listening to their personal problems, going shopping together. Some rental friends are even hired to attend family events, acting as a supportive, close friend to help the client save face or avoid awkward family questions. But here is where it gets tricky. These everyday, normal activities become emotionally complicated the second you introduce money. You are paying for the experience of companionship, which totally changes the fundamental nature of the interaction. I do want to clear up a very common misconception right off the bat, though. When people hear about renting companionship in a big city, they almost always immediately assume it's about romance or dating. But that is not the reality for this specific industry. Many of the customers booking these apps aren't looking for romance at all. They are simply desperate for connection. They literally just want someone to listen to them. They want to feel seen and heard in a society where they otherwise feel totally invisible.
So, who exactly is booking these services? Well, first, we have elderly people who have no family living nearby, which is a rapidly growing demographic in Japan. Next, we have salarymen, these office workers who are so completely consumed by long working hours that their entire lives basically exist inside office walls and train cars, leaving them absolutely no time or energy to build real social circles. And finally, foreigners living in Japan, who are often struggling with intense language barriers and cultural isolation. These are real people trying to navigate a society where openly expressing deep emotions or asking for help can sometimes carry a really heavy social stigma.
Because for many of these individuals, paying a stranger to listen often feels infinitely easier than asking for real help from their actual peers or family members. For a few hours, they get to escape their loneliness. They get to feel important. The person sitting across the table is focused entirely on them. But we always have to remember, this is an illusion. It's a temporary escape hatch from a much deeper societal problem, and that's exactly where the structure of this industry starts to reveal its darker edges.
So, the crucial point is this darker reality. When the money stops, the friendship usually disappears too. Critics point out that because the emotional line between a paid service and real, authentic friendship is so incredibly blurry, it creates a very dangerous trap. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great the conversation was, the connection only exists because of a financial transaction.
And this emotional blur creates a trap, what we can call the cycle of dependency. It starts off simply enough, right? Just purchasing some temporary comfort. But then, as we move into the next phase, the customer slowly starts actually believing the relationship is real. They become genuinely emotionally attached to their rental friend, which leads directly to the final, incredibly damaging step, spending massive amounts of money just to maintain the fake relationship. Former customers have reported completely draining their life savings just to keep this illusion of friendship alive, mostly because the alternative, returning to total isolation, is just way too painful to face.
But hey, the dark side of this industry doesn't just affect the customers. It takes a really heavy toll on the workers themselves, who report hiding profound emotional exhaustion behind forced smiles. Think about it from their perspective for a second. Listening to other people's deep loneliness and personal trauma every single day is incredibly mentally draining. Rental companions often describe feeling totally trapped, caught in this exhausting, weird space between acting as a detached professional and having to pretend to care deeply about a complete stranger for hours on end.
Furthermore, this entire industry basically operates in a gray area. Because these interactions mostly happen privately, in cafes, on walks, or even in people's homes, the industry remains notoriously difficult to regulate. And when vulnerable, deeply lonely people are interacting privately with paid companions, things can go wrong. There are absolutely reports of emotional manipulation and exploitation occurring behind closed doors. What starts as a simple search for temporary comfort can very easily devolve into a dangerous, expensive dependence.
And this brilliantly illustrates a much wider, macro-level point. We can't just look at these rental friend apps in a vacuum. The sheer success of this industry is a reflection of a massive structural issue in modern Japan. Japan currently has one of the fastest aging populations in the entire world, combined with a major cultural shift toward living completely alone for years at a time. The rental friend industry is, essentially, just a symptom of a much larger disease.
To put that into perspective, the social isolation crisis has become so incredibly severe in Japan that the government recently took a completely unprecedented step. They actually appointed exactly one specific cabinet-level position to address it: a Minister of Loneliness. Let that sink in. That is how deeply this isolation has fractured society. It literally requires its own dedicated government minister to try and solve it.
And, it brings up this heartbreaking irony about the era we live in. Online, thanks to technology, we are theoretically more connected than at any other point in history. We can message anyone, anywhere, instantly. Yet, in real life, the emotional distance between people just continues to grow wider and wider. Industries like the rental friend market don't exist because they're just a fun, quirky novelty. They survive and they thrive because they are actively filling profound emotional gaps that modern society has completely failed to solve. Which brings us to this grounded realization. The Tokyo rental friends industry is both completely fascinating and deeply, deeply unsettling. Yes, it provides a very real temporary comfort to people going from incredibly difficult times. But it forces us to ask, can companionship really be treated like a simple service? What happens to our humanity when connection is just something we rent by the hour? Maybe the real story here isn't about the rental friends at all. Maybe it's simply a mirror, reflecting the deep loneliness that our modern society is desperately struggling to hide. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If you found yourself alone in a massive city, completely disconnected, would you ever use a rental friend service? Would you pay for an hour of someone's time just to feel heard? It's a complex question about our fundamental human need for connection. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this encourages you to reflect on the real connections in your own life.